Welcome to our weekly Bible Reader Companion Series. This week our reading is taken from Matthew chapters 13 through 22, with our memory verse being taken from Matthew chapter 18 and verse 4. From the New King James, our memory verse reads, "Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." As this chapter opens answering a question by his disciples, Jesus taught the need for childlike humility and the danger of offenses to others and to self that would come if one did not have this disposition. No doubt that Jesus' disciples had been troubled from his announcement of suffering and death that was to happen. It seems their thoughts had turned from grief to the new kingdom that was to be set up, and possibly their standing, rank, or authority that they might have. Mark and Luke set the occasion of this inquiry in Capernaum after the apostles had argued over this matter on the way of who would be greater. The disciples were occupied with unworthy ambitions and longings for imaginary honors, maybe much like children of heirs quarreling over the estate before the death of the benefactor. Let's pick up the reading here as we see Jesus' response to their discussion and thinking. Let's begin in Matthew chapter 18 and read 1 through 4. Matthew 18, 1 through 4. "At that time the disciples came to Jesus, saying, 'Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?' Then Jesus called a little child to him, set him in the midst of them, and said, 'Assuredly, I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven.'" Luke's account indicates that Jesus had perceived the thoughts of their heart, that is, that their question sought to avoid what they had been discussing really, and admitting their dispute, now uses this little child for an object lesson, a lesson on false ambition versus the childlike humility that is required to enter the kingdom of heaven. This question, as the Lord points out, would not be asked if one was imbued or permeated or infused with humility. Jesus' symbolic object lesson by taking a little child and teaching the disciples or the apostles here must have been a jolting, powerful lesson to them. The disciples are still confused or do not understand completely the true nature of the kingdom that Jesus has been teaching about. It was not going to be earthly, with royal splendor, with grand distinctions in office that ruled over the nations, but it would be a spiritual kingdom. Jesus says regarding the child that he put before them, he says, "Except ye, or unless ye are converted," which means to turn and become like this child, you cannot enter the kingdom. The responsibility was on them. They had the opportunity, the ability, and power to change and to become fit subjects of the kingdom. They needed to turn back to the condition or disposition of when they were a child. If you think about a child's disposition, they're innocent and humble and docile. They don't have any selfish ambitions or intent. They love unconditionally. They do not hate. They do not have interest in wealth or envy. They believe what they're told, and so on. Jesus demands that his disciples trust him and obey him in complete humility, following his example that he set. The kingdom of heaven is composed of the meek on the earth. The greatness in the sight of God, or the greatest in the sight of God, are those who are the most humble and obedient, those who are most like Christ in service to God and to service to man or one another. Here Christ presents the new standard or measure of greatness, contrary to the wise and the prudent of this age. The new way that he's presenting is the way up is down in humility and up in greatness to God. Jesus clearly answers the question in verse 1 to who is the greatest. The child of God who humbles himself, like the little child, to think the Father knows best, and he knows it because his Father says so, will be crowned with the highest honors in the kingdom of heaven. Let us never be built up with pride, but be poor in spirit, humble as we serve God and one another together. And let us remember and think on our memory verse this week, Matthew 18 and verse 4. "Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Thank you, and join us again tomorrow as we continue to meditate on God's Word together.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook for more content like this.